So, listen to this. Back in 2021, for some reason, me and my dad watched Man United a lot. And as two complete casuals, the one thing that shocked us the most was how bad Marcus Rashford was. Watching him play got so rough. We had a running joke where whenever he got the ball, we'd start a 3-second countdown. 3, 2, 1. Because 9 out of 10 times, before we could even finish, he had already lost possession. Every time we'd look at each other in disbelief and ask, isn't this the guy they constantly compare to Mbappe? Look, I'm gonna be honest, even now, whenever I catch myself thinking about it, I'm like, surely we were too hard on the guy, we were exaggerating, just joking around. So I decided to put it to the test. I checked his stats for that season and, goddamn, one-on-one, he was one of the worst players in the whole league. 9 out of every 10 wingers had a higher percentage of successful take-ons than him, and somehow this season, he got twice as bad. Only 3% of all wingers have performed worse than him. Even Anthony, reportedly the most useless player in the league, has outdone him by far. Matter of fact, not only did Anthony put himself in goal-scoring situations 5 times more often than him, but he progressed the ball up the pitch 70% more than the so-called progression monster, Marcus Rashford. Looking at his scouting report, there is no way to get past it. Rashford's stats are trash tier. He cannot even compete with the average winger, let alone with the best in the world. So, what happened? Why do so many still treat this 27-year-old like he's the next great English wonder kid? How did he scam everyone into believing he could reach Mbappe's level? Well, one thing that surely didn't help was how fast he became a superstar. You see, inside Man United's academy, there's a special program designed only for the most exceptionally talented. It's uncommon for a player under the age of 14 to be brought in, and their own rules forbid them from signing up anyone under 12 years old. However, those rules were only broken once, when they brought in 11-year-old Marcus Rashford. Before he'd hit puberty, he was already putting in shifts alongside some of the highest rated young talents in the world, boys who were 4 to 5 years older than him, Paul Pogba, Ravel Morris and Jesse Lingard. However, what no one expected was that he'd make it into the first team faster than any of them. By 15, Rashford trained with the senior squad for the first time. By 17, after going on a streak of 8 goals in 6 matches while playing 2 age groups above his own, Van Gaal was already bringing him onto the bench. Soon, he was telling the press how he had rejected multiple loan offers for a kid he described as the new Patrick Kluivert, and only days after that, with 13 players already injured, Van Gaal watched his last available winger, Anthony Martial, collapse during the warm-up to their Europa League last 16 match against Midtjylland, so he said to hell with it and put Rashford on a starting 11. 1 hour into that match, United had only an own goal to thank for the fact they weren't losing to one of the lowest rated teams in the competition, but then Marcus Rashford showed up out of nowhere to put them ahead, first breaking George Best's record for the club's youngest goal scorer in an European competition, and 11 minutes later getting another goal to take the man of the match on his debut. At that point, the hype was already through the roof, but with Van Gaal warning everyone that youngsters often play well in the first match, but the second is very different, at least the wisest of fans knew not to get their hopes up, or I guess they managed to do that, until Rashford was called up again 3 days later against Arsenal and proceeded not just to score another 2 goals but to assist their third as they took a 3-2 win. Completely breaking apart Van Gaal's theory, he was forced to admit this performance had been even better than the first and convincing everyone in the country that he was to become the next Man United great, even though the following day at 9 a.m. he was back in school. No matter what, by the end of his debut season, even with Van Gaal's tactics forcing him to play the most boring football in the country, Rashford had broken Rooney's record for the youngest to ever score in the Manchester Derby. He had brought home an FA Cup winner's medal. He had signed a £20,000 a week contract. He had Ronaldo phenomenal claiming he reminded him of himself. But still, the most shocking of all, after seemingly every manager in his life claimed it was far too early for any of that, Rashford was called up to the Euros before he it even made a single appearance for the national team. 9 days later, he was smacking in a volley 138 seconds into their first match, becoming the youngest ever Englishman to score on his debut, and celebrating alongside Rooney, while his idol had to submit to wearing the number 19 shirt, as his iconic number 9 was now on Rashford's back. As the kid himself would say, 6 months ago I was trying to get into United's under-21 side, now I'm here. None of this seems real. Regardless, with his teammates getting shipped back home by Iceland, in a flash he was already back home, where, with Van Gaal getting the sack, it was time for the Mourinho era. After humbly accepting a call-up to the English under-21s at the start of the season, Rashford quickly scored the hat-trick to show everyone that he clearly didn't need some reality check. In fact, even with the arrival of Zlatan Ibrahimovic at the club, no matter how much some complained about whatever time he spent on the bench, midway through the season, Rashford was only narrowly losing out on the Golden Boy award to Renato Sanches. And though from September to April he'd be involved in only 4 goals, which seemed like the first warning of what was to come, by the end of the season, he popped off tremendously, opening things up with a goal against Chelsea and then clutching the Europa League quarter-final match against Anderlecht, assisting to open the scoreboard, as well as scoring in extra time to put them in the semis, where he scored their first and assisted their second as they narrowly made it past Celta de Vigo and into the final. Suddenly, before Rashford had grown old enough to take off his braces, he was an European champion, but if his arrival seemed to match up precisely with United's revival after a 4-year-long struggle, even if he had pundits going as far as comparing him to Henry, this would be his last trophy for 6 years. After starting his 3rd season with 12 goal contributions in 14 matches, quite literally averaging a goal or assist every 65 minutes he was on the pitch, he legitimately had some arguing that he should have won the Golden Boy over Mbappe and Dembele, but the difference was that while those two kept going throughout the rest of the season, Rashford again went missing. Only 6 more goals between October and the end of the season, and though some tried to blame the arrival of Alexis Sanchez on his dry streak, as Mourinho himself made sure to point out at the end, no player in the squad had made more appearances than Marcus Rashford. To make matters worse, over summer he played a seriously forgettable role at the World Cup, even though England damn near reached the final, and then scored just 3 goals over the first 4 months of the season, with Mourinho handing him Ibrahimovic's number 10 shirt, only to end up getting sacked and replaced by Solskjaer, who, coincidentally, just happened to be the first coach who truly fit Rashford's playstyle. And here's where a really important point has to be made. Rashford's problem isn't a lack of world-class attributes. He clearly has a lot going for him in many ways. The problem is that his skill set is seriously narrow, meaning he can only apply it effectively to very specific game scenarios. In other words, maybe if he played at one of the highest performing clubs in Europe in a system that truly fit him and flowed all around him, he could be one of the scariest players in the world. But the thing is, so could a lot of other players. Adaptability is one of the most underlooked aspects of a player's game. It's the difference between having a great peak midway through your career and maintaining world-class status for over a decade. In fact, the one other aspect that plays a big role in that is your mental resilience, your ability not to be overwhelmed by your own success and not to drown in your own sorrows when things go astray. And when it comes to Rashford, well, he seems horrible at both. Around the time of Ole's arrival, he did improve, with 12 goal contributions in the span of 12 matches, even becoming the first United player to take the league's Player of the Month award after 3 years. But after that, he kind of disappeared again, and though that penalty to defeat PSG was enough to get Solskjaer claiming that he was a different class, to get some newspapers saying that Rashford versus Mbappe could be the new Messi versus Ronaldo, he already had many pundits like Jamie Carragher predicting that he would have to leave United to fulfill his potential. Even Mourinho went on record saying that Rashford is young, but he's experienced. He already has more Premier League matches than most 25-year-olds. Sure, he's a very good player in some models of play, but he doesn't have a 30-goal season in him. He won't get any better as a target man. Still, inside Solskjaer's system, he did quickly reach one of the highest peaks of his career. First, he opened the season with a brace against Chelsea, then he ended Liverpool's 17-match winning streak. But after quickly going on an incredible goal-scoring run with 20 goal contributions over 20 matches, he fractured his back the very next game, going out for 5 months. Though, in a weird way, I guess you could say he was lucky enough that it was precisely when football had to be interrupted because of the pandemic, which not only allowed him to carry on with his season without missing nowhere near as many matches as first expected, but made him into a national hero. Look, here's another point I feel I really have to make. No matter how negative the tone of this video may be, Rashford is an example to any other footballer in terms of his work outside the pitch, and I truly admire him as a person. I'm sure you all know this, but over the lockdown, Rashford didn't just start a campaign that was able to raise £20 million to feed over 500,000 children across the country, but his open letter to the UK government played a big role in a change of policy that extended free school meals into the summer holidays. I don't think there's much more you could ask of him, but somehow, when it came to its impact on his football, that turned out to be a double-edged sword. As Rashford himself admitted, when everyone is telling me they love me, I get suspicious. Don't get me wrong, at the end of the season, Rashford was still voted the club's player of the season for the first time. Matter of fact, even got voted by the FWA as the third best in the country, but even though the following season he'd be able to somewhat maintain his level, shocking everyone right out the bat by coming in against Leipzig with only 27 minutes left in the game and somehow scoring his first ever hat-trick, not to mention another game-winning goal against PSG, as well as the fact that by January, United was on top of the Premier League table for the first time since 2012, well, then, even if not as abruptly as before, he progressively slowed down throughout the second half of the season, complaining that he had not played a game completely pain-free in 2 years. Eventually, closing it all out with just 6 goal contributions in the final 18 matches, a far cry from his 27 over the first 39, not just allowing City to completely run away with the title, but being unable to make the difference, as United made it all the way to the Europa League final, only to finish their season completely trophyless. Though, really, that was not when the majority of fans turned their backs on him, no. A couple months later, Rashford made it to the Euros and, on the back of these disappointing performances, he was barely afforded any minutes. However, with 1 minute of extra time left in their final against Italy, he was brought in for the shootout and was the first to miss. Maybe even more important, the oldest to miss. Rashford could not be afforded the same leniency that the likes of Saka got, and so, faster than I could have imagined, the dark underbelly of football was exposed. Rashford was blasted with racial abuse on social media. Even his mural was vandalized. He was public enemy number 1, and he simply wasn't cut out to deal with that much hate. Especially not when Solskjaer was sacked. With only 2 wins in the first 7 matches of the season, Solskjaer barely had time to question what was going on with his team before Ralf Rangnick was brought in, and under his new manager, Rashford played the worst football of his life. 2 goals over the next 320 days, almost a full year. Especially from February onwards, it's hard to even put it into words. Rashford did not play even 1 average game. They were all absolutely terrible. So much so that he wasn't even being called up to the national team anymore, not even for friendlies. But well, this is Rashford, so guess what happened next? He played quite simply the best football of his life. In a flash, Rangnick was sent away, Ten Hag arrived, and by the time September ended, Rashford was the league's player of the month, with 8 goal contributions in the first 8 matches of the season. And after a bit of a quieter streak over October, he left for the World Cup in Qatar, and proceeded to score 3 goals in the mere 136 minutes he was afforded, the most by a United player at an international tournament since Bobby Charlton in 1966. Still, somehow, coming back and going on a streak of 20 goal contributions in 17 matches around the holidays. By the winter market, he had PSG playing with the idea of signing him as they began to fear the inevitable exit of Kylian Mbappe. By February, he was already taking his 3rd Player of the Month award of the season, something only Mohamed Salah had ever achieved. By then, even Ten Hag himself had fallen victim to the Mbappe comparisons, claiming that, in his position, Mbappe was the only player in the world who was better than him. Only to then watch as his team got demolished 7-0 by Liverpool, completely breaking down Rashford's morale, who would once again settle for just 5 more goals over the next 18 matches, despite having racked up 25 over the first 38. Regardless, one way or another, he had won the League Cup, his first trophy in 6 years. He had topped the goal-scoring charts there, and in the Europa League, he was Man United's Player of the Season once again. He had even been voted by the fans as the league's Player of the Year, despite not even being nominated by his fellow players for that same award. And above all, he had been the first United player since Van Persie to hit 30 goals in a season, with Ten Hag claiming that if we push him more, I'm sure he could hit 40, which was just god-awful judgment on his part. Already declining for a few months, having split with his fiancée over summer and now receiving a new £375,000 a week contract, Rashford unbelievably scored just 3 goals in the first half of the season, and then, in January, he proceeded to call in sick to training, not realizing he had been spotted the night before drinking at a nightclub, to the point he needed his friend's help to get back to his hotel. Suddenly, as rumors went around that the club could fine him over £500,000, everyone who for some reason had something against him ever since his charity work came after him, claiming he acts high and mighty but is a complete wrong'un. At their next match, there were fans lifting up signs mocking him for his behavior, and just to add extra spice to the situation, after months of constant online jokes over the fact that Rashford would tweet out an essay every time they lost, he quite literally went ahead and published a full-on open letter getting back at the fans, going as far as writing that if you back me, good. If you doubt me, even better. Only to keep playing just as bad as before. As you may imagine, after that, even Southgate was calling him out. There were serious rumors that United could sell him, and whenever someone ran a poll on Twitter asking the fans what they thought, it was always a landslide. The fans wanted their supposed star boy out of the club. By summer, things had gotten so tense, Rashford had not even been called up to the Euros, and though the first half of the new season would actually go somewhat better, at least for him, then Ten Hag got the sack, Ruben Amorim came in, and in a flash, Rashford wasn't even being allowed to sit on the bench, with Amorim going as far as saying that, "We're missing pace on the bench, but right now, I'd rather bring in our goalkeeping coach than a player who doesn't give his maximum every day." As Rashford admitted that it was time for a new challenge, you could maybe argue that it was too rough to see it all burn down in 2 months. But really, aside from that one good season under Ten Hag, over the last 4 years, Rashford has averaged just 5 goals and 3 assists a season. So, really, this was a long time coming. And now that he has left for Aston Villa, the most you can do is wish him good luck.